Welcome. Thank you all for joining us for this MSBA event that we're having here. And we're glad to welcome a panel from Offit Kurman, a law firm here and nationally. And today we are joined by 4 individuals from the firm. And our goal today is really to give you a sense of a bit of profile about the firm. And you'll hear from different individuals from the firm about what growth has been like over time, and especially in the last year. You'll also hear about client engagement, attorney acquisition, and then you'll hear from 2 new recent hires to the firm about their experiences. So what we'd ask today is if you're not speaking, if you can just mute yourself, and we'll have the chat open here if you have any questions throughout the session. And then we can certainly open it up if anyone has questions at the end and wants to directly engage with our speakers. So today we have Tim Lynch, who is the president and managing principal of the firm. We also have Jim Reese, who's director of business development. Sarah Sawyer, who is counsel in Baltimore. She has background as an employment attorney and business advisor, and she's been at the firm now in this position for 15 months. And then we also have Mo Saeed, who's a principal in Bethesda, and he is an immigration attorney and also has a background in international business, and he's been at the firm now for 16 months. So I'd like to start off by asking our panel here to just give a brief introduction about yourself and a little bit about your day-to-day. So maybe Tim, we could start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Shailene. Thanks everyone for joining. As you mentioned, my job as president and managing principal at the firm. So that means I, along with other members of the management committee, which is our executive committee, we spend most of our time day to day running and managing the firm. So 90% of my time is on the management side, probably 10% of my time or less is client facing. Among other things, for purposes of today, I spend a lot of my time on growth aspects of the firm, both through lateral acquisition of attorneys and attorney groups, but also working with our marketing team and others regarding ways that we can improve our organic growth.
Thank you. Jim?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us here to the Maryland State Bar Association. I'm Jim Reese. I'm Director of Business Development at Offit Kurman, and my role is what I call a 3-legged stool. My main role is to attract new clients to the firm. My second role is to recruit partner-level attorneys to the firm. And thirdly, I'm responsible for developing strategic relationships with other partners that might be in the same market where we are. These are typically other professional service providers that serve the middle market. I do what I do by networking and by connecting people. And as my tagline says, let me be your Google. Jim Reese, Director of Business Development.
Thanks, Jim. Sarah?
Morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Sawyer. I'm a labor and employment attorney out of our Baltimore office. I'm actually coming to you out of my Baltimore office in Hamden at the moment. So I've been with the firm now, as you mentioned, 15 months. I'm in our employment group. So generally everything from employment policies all the way through litigation. So just kind of runs the gamut there, all business side on the employment side, and then also doing some general business advisory work. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Mo?
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Mo Sayed. I'm an immigration attorney in our labor and employment group. And quick summary of what I do is I help employers and employees and investors to be where they want to be in terms of their mobility, being able to live and work in the US, and hire talent that is relevant to growth of their businesses. I joined Offit Kurman last year in February, so It's about like just a little past the 1 year anniversary mark, so it's a good time to reflect and share my experience with you. And I look forward to doing that.
Thank you. So Tim, we'll start with you. Why don't you give us a little bit of background about the profile of the firm, number of attorneys, your offices, and maybe a little bit about the culture as well?
Sure. Offit Kurman, we were formed in 1987 by two brothers, Maurice and Ted Offit. And shortly thereafter, Maurice Offit's grade school best friend or middle school best friend, Howard Kurman, joined the firm. So that's how Offit Kurman came about, was two brothers and a best friend joined the firm and started in Baltimore, just outside of Baltimore. And I think the growth of the firm was slow and modest for many years, but the focus of the firm was always the same, which was representing the privately held marketplace. Owner-managed businesses, entrepreneurs, families of wealth. That's who Maurice, Howard, and Ted were representing in the late 80s. And that's 80+% of our client base today. So really the client focus hasn't changed at all. The pricing structure hasn't changed dramatically. I mean, as lawyers gain more experience, they raise their rates, but our rate structure is roughly the same today as it was 20 years ago, with some modest creep for inflation. So in terms of the firm focus, it's always been on the privately held marketplace. I joined the firm in 2004, and we had one office, and there were, I think, 12 attorneys. Today we have more than 240 attorneys. We have 14 offices. We're in 8 states. In terms of Maryland, I think we have 88 lawyers in the state of Maryland. So we've grown quite a bit. And I would say the growth started in the early 2000s, but it's picked up steam since 2007. In 2009, we went into Montgomery County, into Bethesda. And Bethesda, I think, is now our single largest office. That's where Mo sits, which is about, I'll call it roughly 40 attorneys. So we don't have any offices that are massive. So in terms of the growth, when you grow, we've been growing about 15% a year. That's our average over the last 12 years. But as you get bigger, 15% becomes a bigger number. That was our growth rate last year. Even in a COVID year, we grew 15%. And the prior couple of years, we actually grew more than that. Just we had some, and our growth falls into 2 categories in terms of the lateral acquisitions. It's lawyers that are working, most of them are working at small and medium-sized firms because that is our client base. So that would be 1 or 2 or 3 lawyers. And occasionally there is a small firm that wants to join us for a variety of reasons. So that's a little bit about our market, about our footprint. And you asked about culture as well. That one's a tougher one to define. But if you look at our roster of attorneys, of our 240 attorneys, I think close to 200 of them are principals. And that's in part because our model is as younger attorneys join the firm, we take a lot of time, effort, and energy to help develop their natural skills and help them reach the goal of either equity or non-equity principal in the hopefully relative short order. It is the goal of most attorneys is to have that natural progression from associate to counsel to principal to owner. And that is part of the culture. So growth is certainly part of our DNA, but when you dig a little bit deeper, for us, a big part of it is finding lawyers that want to be part of a team, because when you represent the privately held marketplace, their needs they don't just have one need, they have lots of needs. But no one lawyer can serve all those needs. They're required to rely on the skill set of their colleagues and partners. And so part of the recognition, I think our recognition, is that in order to really serve the client base, we need lawyers that want to work with other lawyers. And it means that we are all interdependent on one another to serve the client needs. So part of the culture is when a good client comes in, we want to introduce them to lots of good lawyers at the firm and surround that client with good lawyers. And that requires somebody who wants to work as part of a team. It doesn't mean all the decisions are made as a team. That simply isn't the case. You know, the lawyers are making decisions about whatever it is they're doing. If they need input, they ask for it. But that interdependence and the willingness to work on different clients to serve those needs is a big part of the culture. And I think it's a big part of the growth aspect. And that does lead into the organic growth. As a client comes in for one issue, we want to be able to serve them in a number of different areas, and that leads to organic growth.
So you mentioned that you've continued to have a 15% growth over the years, even during COVID. Can you talk about some of the growth challenges that you faced? And maybe if you could kind of talk about pre-COVID and then in COVID times, what you've seen as the challenges.
Sure. Well, when we were, you do certain things, you do things a certain way, and you have policies and procedures in place for a reason, usually because something didn't work, and then you establish a policy to make sure it works next time. But what we found was that what worked when we were 50 lawyers didn't work at 100, and what worked at 100 didn't work at 150. And so one of the challenges is that we're constantly evolving and adapting our technology, our approach to management, our approach to workflow. So certainly that's been an ongoing challenge. And from a leadership and management standpoint, we have a lot of practice groups, and we need a lot of people who want to be involved in leadership. And so, it's a challenge and an opportunity. I'm not sure if I answered your question exactly, though.
No, you did. And what would you say would be your focus as you're looking forward, say in the next 2 to 5 years, in terms of growth for your firm?
So since 2007, we have managed to a strategic plan, and we are in the process now of developing the next strategic plan. But it'll be continued growth in the marketplace, meaning representing the privately held marketplace. If you look at our footprint, we are an East Coast footprint, and I think we will continue that growth. With the onset of COVID and the pandemic, it opened a lot of people's eyes to being able to operate in a different fashion. So I happen to be sitting in a hotel room today, but a lot of our attorneys are, while our offices are all open, and we probably have on any given day 35% of our attorneys or more are in the office. That means the majority of lawyers are still working from home, at least occasionally during the week, if not every day during the week. And what that's done is it's opened a lot of people's eyes. And I don't think Offit Kurman, I know we're not unique in that regard, but it's opened a lot of lawyers' eyes to how to find support for their client needs without just looking down the hallway. So they can't, right? They've got to pick up the phone or work with somebody who's not working down the hallway. And so if they're not working down the hallway, it means they're working with somebody who's remote. And I think one of the shifts in workflow that has accelerated because of the pandemic is that the willingness and openness to work with people that are not within voice reach is much greater today than it was 12 months ago. And that opens up a lot of opportunity for us when we're looking for talent to not be as limited by geography as we were in the past.
You mentioned that much of your time, the majority of your time, is spent on attorney acquisition and this recruitment. we have many members that are tuning in today and will view this broadcast later, who have been devastated, professionally by the pandemic, or have had some real career shifts, and have had to do some thinking about where they'd like to go. So I think people are really curious to know, what's the profile? What are you looking for as you are looking for new attorneys to join?
Sure. I mean, like most firms, we're looking for good lawyers. But more than that, we're looking for good lawyers who either serve or want to serve the marketplace we're in. Again, that's the privately held marketplace. So if you're a lawyer who's serving the privately held marketplace and you have a skill set that is leverageable across the platform, meaning, you could be the section, 5722 DI statute expert. I just made that up, obviously, probably, but if you're that expert, I mean, that's great, but it's so narrow that there are not too many people in the firm that are going to need that skill set. So what we're looking for are good lawyers who serve the marketplace, who have a skill set that our platform and the marketplace needs on a regular basis. We are looking for people who are interested in growth, because we want to help. The way the firm grows is by helping each of the lawyers grow. And then I mentioned earlier that part of the culture is wanting to work as part of a team, and that is different from a lot of other firms. So that's what we're looking for.
And could you walk us through what that recruitment process looks like from the firm side? So in terms of a timeline, who's involved in the decision making and the steps to that hire?
Sure. So it sort of depends on how the opportunity arises, but we do have an in-house team of professional recruiters. And so oftentimes they'll get a call or reach out from a third-party recruiter, or a reach out from one of the lawyers at the firm saying so-and-so is interested, who should they talk to? So one of those professional recruiters is often the first touch point for the candidates. And then from there, I meet with that team every week, sometimes many times a week. And we'll discuss candidates and what the next step should be. And sometimes the next step would be meeting with a practice group leader, or meeting with the department chair, or meeting with somebody who has, a skill set that's comparable to the candidate. A lot of times I'm the next person that the candidate will speak with. And, a year ago, that meant that I was either on a train or a plane, and we would schedule time to meet in one of our offices. Today, that means it's a meeting like this. And that's been a positive change for me anyway, is less travel. And I think it's most people now sort of accept this as an acceptable means of a first initial meeting. But once we get through that process, we do ask for certain information from the candidates, so that we can assess where they would fit in the organization. But in terms of who else they meet with, it really depends. Is it an individual? Is it a group? Who do they want to meet with? So there's a lot of times candidates come in and they say, I'd like to meet with these 3 people. So we'll facilitate that meeting. And then once we're at a point where I think we've gone through the process of meeting, both sides have met who they want to meet with, and we have the information that we need, I present candidates to the management committee, and we make a decision about whether or not to make an offer and go from there. And that process usually takes a couple of months, but a lot of that timing is candidate driven. If they've got some particular reason they need to move faster, then the process accelerates. What I find is usually candidates are deliberate in their decision making, and so sometimes they need to take more time to evaluate options.
We have a question here in the chat from one of our members, Ross Albers, and he wanted to know how you overcome a client's objection in not wanting to give up control of their firm when you're doing this type of acquisition. And also, how do you determine the value of their firm when you're making this offer?
Well, we don't buy firms. So what happens is lawyers join Offit Kurman, and we have our economic model that is everybody has the same opportunity from a compensation standpoint, meaning we're a corporation, not a partnership, so everyone has a salary-based pay, and we have a number of different bonus opportunities that are objective. So in terms of how do you determine value in our world is determined by the marketplace, and the marketplace of clients externally, and as well as the internal marketplace for production, right? So, if the external marketplace values lawyer ABC, then presumably lawyer ABC is going to have a larger book of business. And on the internal side, it has more to do with how many, so everyone has a different size plate. Some people want to bill 1,200 hours a year. Some people want to bill 2,000 hours a year. In terms of control, if we're talking about somebody who has their own firm and how do you overcome their concern about losing control, I think the decision is theirs, not ours. But what I find is that one, they want to make a change either because they see a greater opportunity with a larger platform, or a lot of times, hopefully it's always that, by the way, but sometimes the driver is they're tired of doing everything. They want to practice law. And when you're running your own business, there's a lot of things you do that has nothing to do with serving client needs or finding clients. And so they're looking to join an organization where they can focus on being a lawyer and focus on finding clients, or they can focus on finding a home for their clients when they decide to retire.
I'd like to turn to Jim now to understand your role in this attorney acquisition. So if you could just talk about how you work with Tim in bringing attorneys to the firm.
Sure. As I mentioned before, I'm responsible for partner level attorney recruiting generally in the Central Maryland region. But, to the extent that I have contacts and connections in other regions, it's wide open. And so I'm effective just by informing my network for reasons why Offit Kurman is a great landing pad for these partner level attorneys who are looking to make a move. They could be sole practitioners. It could be a small boutique practice, or it could be a small group from a large firm. So my role is really informing my network of the opportunities that Offit Kurman has on the on the recruiting side, and just creating some interest around them within my network. That's really what I've been able to do.
And as we're now in this new remote world of lawyering and engaging with clients, a lot of our members, this is a new landscape for them. So could you talk about how this remote attorney, how that factors into the recruitment process, whether that's a consideration whether that's something you're taking into consideration when you're thinking about offers, and also if you're an attorney that's interested in this kind of lateral move, how do you position and market yourself now that we're all in this virtual space to attract the attention of you and Tim and the firm?
Sure. Well, I'll take a first shot at that, and I'm sure Tim and the others probably have some comments as well. But since we're in pandemic time, people are now accustomed to working remotely, so it's not a foreign idea, and it actually gives us more opportunities because There could be opportunities for candidates that are even outside of our footprint that can work remotely and provide services to our clients and their clients with the platform that we provide. So the remote work, I think, allows us greater opportunities. That's the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. And the firm has given the attorneys the option to work remotely. Certainly not encouraging and not discouraging people to come back to the offices, but to come back when they're ready. So it definitely has changed the recruiting process somewhat, but I think on a positive level.
Okay. And you mentioned in your intro that you're also very much involved in the client engagement piece and acquisition side. So that's quite different than what Tim's working on. So could you talk about that? And again, in a remote and then before COVID in a non-remote environment, what that looks like?
Sure. Well, obviously, as a business development person, my main role is to attract new clients to the firm. And pre-pandemic, it meant that I was in the car all the time, driving maybe from Anne Arundel County to Howard County to Baltimore County to Montgomery County. I was all over the place. Tried to manage my calendar so that I wasn't crisscrossing myself, but I spent a lot of time in the car and all in-person meetings and in-person networking events. When the pandemic hit, I think it was probably early April, I realized that that this was here to stay, and I was somewhat smart enough and somewhat lucky enough to put together a couple of my own virtual events, because as a business development guy, I realized that if you want to get in front of certain people, like business owners in my case, create your own event and invite those people to your event. So you're not wondering if you're going to someone else's event, if you're going to meet the right people. So I created a couple of my own events and invited my prospects, my clients, my centers of influence, and they've worked out great. So they're very popular. They're 1 hour. So for people who are attending, you don't need to drive there. There's no commuting time. You're in and out in 1 hour. And one of the events is actually less than an hour. And we have an optional networking piece at the end of it. So they've become very popular. And from the feedback we've gotten, people want us to continue with the events and continue with them virtually. So people are always asking me, what's going to happen to these events? I think there'll be somewhat of a hybrid situation where some events will go back to in person and some events will stay virtual because of it just makes it easy without the commuting. I think I'm very active in several of the local chambers of commerce, and I know they're itching to get back to in-person events. That's really been their strength. It's also a major source of revenue for them. So they want to get back safely and responsibly. They're already starting some of those events now. But there are others that people are still sort of up in the air, whether they'll be in person or virtual. Obviously, we all believe that we've become very efficient and very productive during the pandemic with virtual events and virtual meetings. But some of this has to go back to in person. It's just a matter of which ones.
Another question in the chat for you, Jim. In terms of tracking your relationships, what, if any, CRM are you using to track that? And what is your strategy to make sure that you stay connected to these people, that you don't just meet them at an event, have that one-on-one, and then lose contact?
Great question. Well, number one, my calendar really is my Bible. I have a very detailed calendar. It's color coded. Thanks to our IT team, they really helped me out with that. It looks like a rainbow when you look at my calendar. As far as a CRM, I use a very special one. It's called Jim Reese's Word document. That's my CRM. So that's where I track my meetings with clients and prospects. And it's worked great for me. So I don't have a fancy CRM. Probably will in the next year or so. But my Word document works really well for me. I keep great notes in a notebook, the calendar, and plus with all of my marketing activities, I'm able to stay connected and stay top of mind with my network. So I've got a monthly email newsletter. I've got these weekly virtual events that I'm sending invitations for. So, and plus my activity on LinkedIn, it does keep me top of mind. And I think I can attribute a lot of my success for just being top of mind.
Great. You mentioned that there are different associations and groups that are more on the business side that you're engaged with. Could you give our members an idea of what some of those organizations are in this Maryland region and beyond? Because many of our members, as you all were saying earlier, wear many hats. So they might not have that business development person who's not practicing to do this full time. So I think it'd be helpful if you could share what some of those associations and groups are.
Sure. And understandably, I know that I'm sure many of the people in the group this morning are wearing business development hat, as well as running their firm, as well as doing client work. And I make it really clear when I speak to people, I only wear one hat, and that's a business development hat. I'm not an attorney. I'm a career business guy, so I don't do client work. I just do business development. Starting with the chambers of commerce, there's some great chambers of commerce wherever wherever your market is, whether it's Howard County Chamber, Central Maryland Chamber, Baltimore City Chamber, Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Greater Baltimore Black Chamber of Commerce, Montgomery Chamber of Commerce. There's some great chambers of commerce. They're very active. They have active memberships. My suggestion is, if you join a chamber or if you're a member of one of those chambers already, leverage a relationship with the executive director and ask for introductions. So if there's certain members in those chambers that you want to meet, I go right to the top. I go to the executive director and ask for introductions, or I might even ask them, who should I meet who are members of the chamber? So the chambers are a good place to start. Then there are industry associations like the Regional Manufacturing Institute, otherwise known as RMI. There's CAMI, which is the Cybersecurity Association of Maryland. There's the Maryland Tech Council. There are lots of groups like that are good groups. There's BWI Business Partnership. There's the there's plenty of organizations to join. There's also networking groups to join. There's tons of them. So don't spread yourself too thin. Just think about, where are your prospects? Where do your prospects go? Are they going to industry association events? Are they going to chambers of commerce events? Wherever your prospects are going, that's probably where you should be joining or thinking about joining.
Well, I think your Word document is working really well, because you just gave us a great number of tools and associations to think about. I'd like to turn now to Sarah to give us the perspective of someone that has gone through this process at Offit Kurman. And Sarah, could you start off by talking about the reasons that you were interested in coming to Offit?
Yeah, of course. So actually, it's a lot of the reasons that have been touched on a little bit by Tim and Jim, and really just the environment of wanting to both do the client work side, also growing your business. I'm a council level attorney right now. I was an associate with the firm. Now I'm kind of in this in between where I'm, looking to reach that principal level. So and that can happen fairly quickly at Offit Kurman. So it really is, a hit the ground running, trying to build your book kind of situation, in which I was very drawn to, because that's something that I am very interested in doing. So I'm about 7 years out of law school right now. A lot of my friends from school are at firms, and they are at more traditional firms where they're not going to be looking to do any of the things that Jim just mentioned, any of those groups or anything for a long time. They're very head down in their work, which I tend to be head down in my work, but also popping my head up to go to events and do a lot of the things that Jim mentioned. So wearing both hats. And that's something that I really wanted to do, and something that really drew me to the firm. Being able to build my book and have my own clients within the framework of Offit Kurman, and also having access to all of these great attorneys, throughout our various regions and various offices. So it had both the combination of having the tools I need to grow my book, also the access to practice groups and areas that lend themselves really well to my client base. So as Tim mentioned, it's, we're pretty laser focused in who our clients are and what they look like and what their needs are. And so I have found very much that when I have a client that has a need outside of my practice area, that I really have vast resources in being able to, pull someone else in. And I'm constantly working with people in our transaction groups or, our IP groups in different regions. If I have clients that, especially in this remote world, are in different states, or their employees are in different states, having that access. So it's really all of those things that have kind of been mentioned that brought me to the firm.
So in addition to having these multiple practice areas that and your peers that you can turn to if there's a issue not related to your expertise, can you talk more about what some of those specific tools are that the firm offers to support, how you support a client, and also your marketing and growing your book?
Yeah, so as far as the growing the book and marketing piece, we have a robust marketing department. So I work with a marketing director that's in my region that's assigned to me and helps me with all my ideas. So I have a lot of fun with marketing. So I have a lot of ideas, but obviously since I'm wearing a couple different hats, I'm not always able to spend the time on the implementation standpoint. So that's one bucket. I get to have the marketing department help me with that, my blogs, my email newsletters, things like that. Another bucket is obviously having access to Jim. So he's in my region, so that is helpful as well. Jim's good at putting things together and connecting you with people, things like that. And then another bucket is we do what we call origination culture, which is a training program, where we are actually taught tools on how to actually do these things. Because as I'm sure a lot of your members can relate to, in law school, there isn't a class, there should be a class, but there isn't a class on how to do this, how to grow your book, and how to actually do what we would call the business of law. So they teach you a lot of the actual, obviously, practical pieces of how to practice law, which is fundamental in the first step. But then you're kind of left to your own devices to figure out how to figure out the business of law. And so that is something that the firm offers us as well. So really combining all three of those buckets and figuring out a way to get the clients in the door.
Can you walk us through from your side what the recruitment experience was for you? We've heard from Tim and Jim about what it is from the firm side, but if you could walk us through that.
Yeah, so it definitely is a long process, I would say, in a good way. It's very much, you kind of start just kind of the conversation around what the firm has to offer, what you're looking for, having an initial meeting, as Tim mentioned, with someone who's in your area. And there's a couple of different ways like that you come to the firm. So I originally came to the firm through just a couple of connections that knew the firm. There was an opening, but I didn't necessarily apply through that opening. And so I had kind of an initial meeting about what the firm had to offer and more about the firm, then kind of drilling down into the position itself, who I would be working with, and meeting with Tim. And that happens actually a fair amount. We have recruiters, and that's a big portion of it, but we also encourage other attorneys and folks to recruit from their network. So that is a piece as well. So that's kind of more how I came into the firm, was, just a connection and knowing, starting to get to know the firm. And so that's part of it as well, because as Tim mentioned, we're looking for good lawyers. I'm actually on the recruitment and retention task force for our women's committee at the firm. And that's something that, we promote a lot to folks internally as well, because, good people know good people. So, if we're out in the world, getting to know people looking for clients, you're also getting to know other lawyers and may have good people that might be a good fit for the firm. And so that's kind of another way as well. But we spend a lot of time getting to know folks, seeing if they're a good fit before hiring them. That's kind of what my experience was as well.
Could you give maybe top 3 tips to members who might be interested in making this kind of transition? What should they be thinking about? What should be top of mind for them?
So making a transition into
this kind of lateral movement and into this kind of firm.
So I would say looking at what you want your practice to look like, who your clients are, how you can best serve them, because that's really, so you had asked me earlier, and I don't believe I answered your question about kind of just the resources of the firm as far as the clients are concerned. And so I think that's where a big part of the consideration is, well, what do my clients look like? How can I best serve them? What does that look like if I'm making a lateral move? What does the firm have to offer? As Tim or Jim mentioned, having the resources of the firm, not having to do billing yourself, right? So we sometimes have people who are on their own who come to the firm and they've been handling all of the administrative burden, all of those things. So coming to the firm really opens up not having to do that on a day-to-day basis and being able to serve the clients more and do more of the client-based work. So that's, I think, really the main piece is, how do you want to serve your clients? What does that look like? And how would you benefit from that type of move?
And what sort of role has the MSBA played in your development as an attorney, and what advice could you offer to our members watching about how they can use the association to help them with their practice and their business?
So as I was kind of mentioning, as far as recruitment and it's kind of the networking piece, I mean, that's a huge piece. It's just really being out there, getting to know people, and really benefiting from the advice that others have to offer, the information that others have to share, as far as running their practice, gaining clients, dealing with some of the issues, dealing with some of the questions that we had here today, as far as getting tips from other practitioners on how to handle certain situations. So I think that's really a key. And then also just for folks who are looking, who have maybe been impacted from COVID, as I mentioned about recruitment, is that a lot of times it's knowing someone, having that connection. So I think that's a really huge value, is getting to know other attorneys in the marketplace.
Thanks. Mo, could you talk to us a little bit about your background, your career, where you've come from, and why you decided to make this move to Offit?
Sure, thanks a lot. I came to Offit Kurman after having started and grown my own solo law practice for about 10 years before that. And when I started as a solo, it was a general practice truly, and as I developed and sort of through the growing pains of building a book and then building a specific expertise, at the point where I just right before I started to talk with Offit Kurman, I was at a point where I had built up a strong expertise in immigration, a good book of business. The pain points that I had were that I had enough work to keep me busy. But in that last year, there was too much work. And it was at a point where I had to decide, okay, do I want to keep growing my own and hire other people and have staff? Because I literally had 1 week where I was really afraid that if I got unwell, sick or something, I had 7 deadlines in 1 week, and if I couldn't meet them, I didn't have somebody else that I could say, hey, could you help me out a little bit? So I started thinking, okay, Mo, it may be time now to think about what you want to do. And so the timing was really right in terms of connecting with Offit Kurman, very respected firm, very good profile in the community, and was at that time interested in growing and expanding. We were looking to grow our immigration practice. And so to me professionally, it made a lot of sense. I think that like Tim was saying about this idea of losing control, I don't feel that I lost control. Like you have to set your own limits. Like if you have the ability to say no, if the firm provides a really good platform to keep your autonomy and grow and use your strengths. Like it's not, I'd never felt forced to go into something that I felt that, hey, look, this is not consistent with my own plans for my own growth. And some of the stuff that both I think Jim and Sarah were mentioning in terms of I personally, I really enjoy the business development part. I like the network. I enjoy getting to know what other people do, and having this resource. I mean, I often would, even when I was a solo, I would pick my friends' brains, hey, what do you think of this? How do you, okay, bar association activities, talking to folks in the community, what's the effective strategy to get the word out about, okay, here's what I do, how can I help you, and things like this. And so within the firm now, I have all these amazing experts and a very professional approach, which helps. I think the other thing, I was taking a couple of notes here as the questions that you're asking. One big thing for me was that a lot of times, and even especially with let's say the bar association activities, I made friends with a lot of lawyers, in different countries, and we built strong personal friendships. Hey, Mo, we're friends, we like each other. Now, my clients have a lot of work, but they don't want to go with a solo. They want a bigger law firm because they don't think you have the bandwidth on your own to handle them. And so I was like, okay, well, all right. So now if somebody, calls me, I can tell them, hey, I have 250-ish experts, different cities, different practice areas. And that way I keep the trust that I have with my contacts. And then, but I also can keep a professional stake, right? I can, and I can also be involved. I don't, even if it's not an immigration matter per se, these matters come up all the time that are outside my practice area. And so, being in a place where I can refer to some trusted colleagues to, help my clients, that's been a huge plus. So, I'll give you a quick example. Like within the first week or so that I joined the firm, I'd actually just made a trip to India a couple of months before, and I met some friends there. And so this family, they had a case, and so they called me. They said, hey, Mo, do you do any intellectual property, or can you help us? It's like they had a case where they were trying to acquire someone that was in bankruptcy, and it also had some IP issues. And so one of the people that I interviewed with, he does bankruptcy work. And so I just went down the hall to him and said, hey, is this something you could do? And it turned into a good matter. And, the client was happy. I didn't have to refer it outside.
That's great.
So, yeah, there's a lot more. I could keep going, but I'll stop.
One question I had both for you and for Sarah. You both mentioned that you have this access to these practice areas. Is there also opportunity, if you're interested, to develop into one of those other practice areas and or, second chair, shadow an attorney in that other area if you're interested?
I might be in a good position as a counsel attorney, but so yeah, there definitely is. I've definitely worked in a couple of different practice areas throughout my time here, and they're really, what I think is great about it is that it's because we're so laser focused on who our clients are and how we support them and what they look like. There's a lot of different ways that the practice areas cross over. Because there's a lot of clients that come to us. I mean, they don't live in a bubble. They don't come to us and say, I have a handbook issue and that's it. And I live in a bubble and that's all I care about. They come to us obviously with a lot of other, concerns. And so a lot of times I'll be talking to a client about a particular employment issue. A handbook is one example, but that often leads to a conversation on a lot of other topics that intersect with that. So like in an employment agreement, for example, there's IP issues, there's other types of issues. So I can, just give that off to someone else, or I can stay involved in that. I can also, there's a lot of crossover between different areas, especially I do some litigation as well. So once you've got that skill, it's something that you can get involved in different practice areas. So there definitely is a team environment, as Tim mentioned, as far as being able to, both work with other attorneys as far as making sure your clients get their needs met, as Mo was mentioning the story that he told, but also if you're interested in getting involved on a case or something, or you don't necessarily want to roll off and just provide that matter to a different attorney, you can also stay involved. So there's a lot of flexibility in the practice here. There's a lot of ability to be flexible in your approach, I would say.
We have another question here in the chat also for you, Mo and Sarah. How do you find this time management and balancing your billable requirements while also growing your book of business? Because I think that's a big concern for attorneys that are looking at making this kind of move, as you did, Mo.
Sure. Yeah, I can take that. So balancing your billable hours and the origination. So I think, for me, it was I had my own book and there was a certain expectation. I had a target for my first year that was, I had a role in setting what that was based on, what I could commit to reasonably. So you can set it like ambitious, or, you should definitely set it reasonably. Not over promise, right, and under deliver, but I mean the other way is better. So for me, I didn't really find that type of a tension between the two. I had my origination occurring periodically. There were times when I had work from other attorneys that was billing and not my own origination. I found it fairly comfortable balancing them. If it was, most of my colleagues are courteous, like, hey, Mo, do you have time to do this? Do you have the bandwidth? And I could say yes or no. I think, so getting new origination, there's going to be, that you definitely got to be diligent about, managing time and making an effort very regularly to keep doing the business development things that you do. But I honestly, myself personally, I didn't find myself in a situation where I had a flood of billable work from other attorneys and I couldn't handle my own origination. So I don't know if I'll have different experience. Not sure.
Yeah, I would say I started out a little bit burning the candles at the candle at both ends for sure. And I think because exciting when you like both buckets, when you like the client work and you like the going out and seeking the new client. It's hard sometimes to set those boundaries as far as making sure you don't bite off too much. And what I found was really helpful, and it kind of goes back to an earlier question about what to be considering when you're making a lateral move, is I found it very helpful to set goals and be very deliberate in that approach and say, all right, well, what are my billable goals? What are my origination goals? And it sounds like that came pretty naturally to Mo, but it took me a little bit of time to be like, all right, let me say exactly what do I want to get, what hours, what, and figure out how am I serving both of those in a reasonable manner, and really just having a clear path. And so that's how that kind of leads into just considering a lateral move, is that, these are all things I think that are very helpful to consider before you make a move, because that will really help you figure out like what's a good fit. And then set those expectations going in, and saying like, okay, saying to whatever firm you're looking to go to or wherever you're headed, well, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I want. This is what I want my day to look like. This is what I want my year to look like. This is what I want my book to look like. And really giving some thought to that. And you're not going to know all the answers necessarily, but and it'll definitely be subject to change. But I think that was helpful to me.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, Sarah, that the recruitment process was long, but in a helpful way. So you could have those conversations and, really talk about what those numbers are. Mo?
I was just going to add to the last question. So, to me, it was also super helpful, like to keep an open mind, because one of the first persons that actually I got billable work from was Tim Lynch, and it by working on that matter, which was in a different industry and a slightly different expertise. It was immigration, but it was government investigation/litigation, and so by working with him on this one case, I added to my resume, like what in terms of like, hey, we teamed up on this thing, and now it helps my origination, because if I meet someone else with the same problem, I can say, oh yeah, we did this successfully, So there's that type of relationship for me, many times over, like in whether it's a different industry, immigration, or a different, because within immigration, there's just a ton of different variations. So for me, it's been there's been a very good synergy. So there's not really been a conflict,
Well, I know we're just coming up on 9 o'clock, so I'll turn it over to Tim to close us out. If there's anything else you wanted to add based on what the others have shared, or just what you're thinking on the horizon as you go into the rest of the year.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining, and for Sarah and Mo for sharing your insight, and Jim for sharing your perspective and guidance as well. In terms of the future and what we see in the horizon, I mean, we see lots of opportunity. Right now, the economy is good, and there are a lot of people out there that are in Mo and Sarah's boat, and I think they're looking for other options and solutions. So whether it's Oliver Kurman or some other firm, I think that we'll see a lot of mobility in the next year or two in our marketplace.
Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists here from Offit Kurman, and to all of our members for joining us today. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me or any of them here. And a good morning to you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Shelley.